if you just happen to say the right thing or sound very sincere or say something that seems like that is a really profound point, that it can really travel on social media and it can really go far places. But the real test of somebody who's saying something which is beyond lip service is if they're actually doing that in their own lives. And social media is not going to show you that, because we don't know what's going on in the personal lives of the people that are talking about all of these things. I want to talk today about this verse in the Quran which says Allah will not change the affairs of the people until they change what is within themselves. I know this verse gets used a lot, it gets spoken by a lot of people, it gets talked about a lot, but I want to talk about my own experience with this verse, and I want to talk about my own observations and what I think it means for us. This is just purely my own observation, my own interpretation of what that might mean for us, and just my views really. But I want to start with sharing an example of where this really started to mean a lot to me. A number of years ago, I was part of a community project. This was a non-profit, and the goal of this non-profit, there was about 10 or 15 of us men, and the goal was that we were basically to recover a community project that had been captured by a group of people that were making use of a building and of other services. They were making fraudulent use of it. They weren't making it open to the public in the way that it should have been open to the rest of the public. So women were barred from this community project, from this building, even though it was supposed to be open to them. And there were a whole host of other things as well that weren't running right with this particular community project. Now, the non-profit that I was part of, the goal of this project was to recover the building in an ethical, professional, legal way, following due procedure and due course, and then reopen this project back to the women, back to society, stop all of the fraud that was taking place inside of this building, and put it back into the hands of the people, and then make it flourish, make it of great use to the society, to the local community, and basically just do amazing things with it, right? So before I had moved to London, before all this had taken place, Ramadan had just passed, and I'd made this big dua to Allah to say that, I really want to be a part of a project that washes me of all of my sins, that guarantees me glad tiding as soon as the day of judgment arrives. And I want to be part of something that is just so big that it just purifies me of everything. So when I got to London, when I first moved to London, I was introduced to this project, and I thought, wow, my duas are being answered. I really thought, this is it. This is the thing that I'm going to be part of, and that's what's going to change everything for me. And when I started to partake in the project, my commitment was 2 or 3 times a week in the evenings, I was taking part in doing whatever work was required in trying to help recover this project. I was spending time in meetings and driving places and working on the website and writing documents and a whole host of stuff. And then I was dedicating some time on the weekends as well, purely for the sake of Allah. I was getting involved, as were the other men that were involved in this project as well. Now, over the course of 12 to 18 months, we had so many meetings, we had so much time that was spent, there was a lot of money that was spent as well, and we basically got nowhere with it, right? And in those 12 to 18 months after the whole thing, after about 18 months, I just decided, I've given it as much as I can. I can't do any more. But after those 18 months, after getting quite disappointed and getting quite deluded and kind of jaded with the whole thing, there is something that started to dawn on me. Initially, I was really excited about this project. I thought, here's my dua being answered. And after about 18 months or so, I started getting really confused, and I thought, well, what in the world was this? I really thought this was it. And then it turns out this was not it at all. So why did Allah take me through all of this journey? And I realized why He took me through it all was to teach me something, which was that if you haven't changed what is inside of yourself, He's not necessarily going to give you victory. And we started to come to at least I did, I started to come to the realization that even though there was a lot of fraud that was taking place in the building with the people that were already running it, and there were a lot of issues, actually they were doing a better job of running this building than the new group, which would include me. And some of the aims that we had, some of the goals that they had, some of them were talking about opening it back up to women, yet their own marriages were failing. They didn't view women particularly well. They didn't have a high opinion of women, yet they were claiming to want to recover this building to put it back into the hands of the sisters and stuff. A lot of these guys had full-time jobs, so they wouldn't have been able to dedicate the time to actually take care of this building. So what I realized was actually this entire project was a vanity project. The commitment from a lot of us was actually just to satisfy our own egos. It was basically a trophy project. And we were getting involved so that we could tell people, yes, we recovered this project and we did this and we achieved this. It was all for the adulation and the validation of it all, which is incredibly dangerous. And so I'm not surprised that Allah didn't give us a victory in this. I'm not surprised that Allah didn't help us achieve our goal in all of this, because we hadn't changed what is within ourselves. And so where I'm going with all of this is that there's so much that's happening in the world right now. There's things that are happening geopolitically, the genocide that's taking place, right? There's things like the alpha male movement, right? People talking about becoming, men again and recovering masculinity. And there's all these things. But to me, what I see in all of this, unfortunately, a lot of this is lip service. And I think, unfortunately, social media has become a massive amplifier of this. And I know it's quite ironic that I'm sat here talking on a YouTube video saying the same thing, because I'm taking advantage of social media to say the same thing as well. But hopefully the message still gets across. And that is that when you're offering lip service to something, social media is a massive amplifier of that. It's very easy, if you just happen to say the right thing, or sound very sincere, or say something that seems like that is a really profound point, that it can really travel on social media and it can really go far places. But the real test of somebody who's saying something which is beyond lip service is if they're actually doing that in their own lives. And social media is not going to show you that, because we don't know what's going on in the personal lives of the people that are talking about all of these things. And I think that's the real test of whether somebody's actually capable or is worthy of talking about the things that they're actually saying. The thing is, social media just amplifies all of that. So as long as what somebody's saying resonates with us, we tend to believe that just because they're saying it, well, there must be somebody who is actually living all of that. And that's not necessarily true, because social media can create a curtain and a veil around all of that. And it can become a bit of a deception. But, these days, especially at the time of this recording, there's so many people, for example, on social media that are constantly sharing their voices in support of Palestine and talking about boycotting and talking about all of these things. But you look at people in their personal lives, they're actually not doing any boycotting. They're actually not making the changes in their personal life that actually reflects what they're actually saying to other people or the image that they're depicting on social media. I've seen it myself. I've gone into people's houses and people have spoken about the boycott, but they're actually not doing any boycotting at all of their own. We're very good at the lip service, and the social media, as I keep saying, has become a really good amplifier of that. It actually amplifies that even further. But if we're not making the change within ourselves, then what's the point? I look at the alpha male movement, for example, and I think, well, all these people that are claiming to be really strong men, how many of them actually know the names of the homeless people in their local vicinity? How many of them know about which women are getting abused as part of domestic violence? And how many of them have actually stepped in and actually made a difference, actually either spoken to the man or helped the woman and actually changed their life in some meaningful way? Probably none. How many people who are watching this know the name or the story of a homeless person near you right now? Unfortunately, this is the case in the West, that wherever we live in the West, there's at least one homeless person in a 3 to 5 square mile radius. That's the state of England right now. It's the case in America. It's the case in a lot of countries right now. But how many of us are actually changing lives of the people that are around us? It's probably very few. Like, we hear about a domestic violence case, but we don't actually do anything about it. It actually takes a lot of commitment. It actually takes giving up a lot. It takes a lot of sacrifice to even get involved and change the life of one person. Unless you are changing the lives of people around you in a meaningful way on a daily basis, or at least on a weekly basis, then what is the point of all this talk? Because that's all it is. It's just talk, and social media is amplifying that. And I think the proof of it all is the verse itself. Allah will not change the affairs of the people until they change what is in themselves. If we had changed what is in our own selves, if we had changed our own personal lives, if we were of benefit to our neighbor, if we were of benefit to more than just our siblings and our parents, but our friend. Like, how many of us know that there might be somebody, another brother, who might actually be suicidal, but we don't know it because we're so busy focused on problems that are thousands of miles away. And that's the problem with something like that. It's because it's thousands of miles away. It's actually really easy to talk about it. It's really easy to say, well, if I was there, I would do this. So it's really easy to say, this is what needs to happen. Because it's abstracted away. It's far away. But nobody's talking about the problems that are happening right on our doorstep. Nobody's addressing any of those. It's very easy to talk about stuff that's thousands of miles away. How many people are actually solving the problems that are in our locality? Because I honestly believe if we were doing that, if we were doing something about getting all the homeless off the street in our local vicinity, stopping issues of domestic violence, dealing with people that have got profound emotional problems that are facing, the thought of suicide and these kind of things. If we were solving all of these problems, I just really heartily believe that Allah wouldn't allow all of this injustice to take place, because we would be proof that we're ready to deal with all of that. Those people that are suffering there in Palestine, they can do those things. That's why they're suffering, because they can actually solve those problems for themselves. They've got the heart that's capable of dealing with all of that, and they're helping each other. It's us that need to worry for ourselves, that are far away, that are living in a lot more comfort, because I don't think Allah deems us strong enough or capable enough of dealing with those problems, because I don't think we've solved what is in ourselves, that He would allow us to actually give us the opportunity to actually go and solve these problems at a much bigger scale. And I think we really need to think about that. How many people are making the genuine sacrifice? How many people who are working in a financial institution that is fully involved with riba are saying to ourselves, wait a minute, you know what? I am willing to give up my salary, my livelihood, because this is wrong. How many of us are actually making that very difficult decision? How many of us are picking up a homeless person off the street when we have a spare bedroom and putting up with bringing somebody in our house at the risk of getting your things stolen, or having to deal with somebody that unfortunately smells a lot or has a drug addiction or any of these things? How many of us are actually doing the hard work to get involved with that? Because you have to do the hard work in yourself before you can help somebody else. But how many of us are doing that very difficult inner work? We're not. And I think this is a major issue that we're really not addressing. And for me, that particular project was a real eye-opener. It took me a couple of years of reflection to really think about that afterwards. I'm now able to see through, and I can see that, this thing actually, unfortunately, is just froth on water. I mean, we have the hadith where Rasulullah has said that there will come a time when the Muslim will just be like froth on water. All I'm saying is we need to start looking inward before we start looking at the outward, before we start acting like we know how to solve the problems that are in the outward. We really need to start looking at our own lives.